Good morning to everybody. We will continue with our research methodology discussion. Up till today we discussed several aspects of research methodology. I started discussing with you modes of different modes of doing Buddhist research, and then in between we went into a few other topics. In my last discussion I talked to you about scientific method and these things because they are useful. So today I am going to continue with the discussion of different ways of doing Buddhist research. Now earlier we discussed the textual studies. Now textual studies are very important for all types of studies, but in addition to that, textual studies itself we are doing in Buddhist studies as a very important aspect. So textual studies provide the basis for all the other studies. On the one hand, textual studies in itself is also very important for Buddhist research. So there is quite a lot of research going on in the many places in the world on textual studies. Okay, then we will move into philosophical studies. This another important thing, studying, doing Buddhist studies, Buddhist research from a philosophical point of view. Now basically what is meant by this is, in order to know as to what philosophical studies is, we need to know what philosophy is. Now I give the few definitions of what philosophy is first, and then we will go into details of how we do Buddhist studies in philosophically. Now in these definitions, philosophy has love of wisdom. Philosophy has theoretical explanation of any subject we study, examination of meta issues. Philosophy has conceptual clarification, analysis and investigation. Then philosophy has the worldview of any individual or a system of thought. Now what this means is, when we say philosophical studies, the very word philosophy is a complex term. It's being used in many different senses. So when we say philosophical studies, it is basically important to have what do we really mean by this. Now this word philosophy comes from ancient Greek word, two words, philo and sophia. So love of wisdom, sophia means wisdom, philo means friend or lover, admirer. So basic idea of philosophy was in the Greek sense love of wisdom. Now what is meant by wisdom is an important question to consider. And in Eastern context we use the word darshana, in Sanskrit language darshana. But today when we talk about philosophical study, we usually have in our mind this Western concept of philosophy. Philosophy as love of wisdom. Now when we use this word wisdom, it means that this is not really love of knowledge. Now wisdom is understood something that goes beyond knowledge. Knowledge is what we gather from reading, from listening, from experience, we gather knowledge. However, wisdom is something beyond knowledge. For example, when we get a university degree, after passing an examination, what we get is basically knowledge. Okay, we get a lot of information. We have a lot of data with us. We know quite a lot of things. Now that is knowledge. However, wisdom is something different. Of course, you have to have knowledge in order to have wisdom. But that does not mean that you have to have a university degree to have wisdom, right? There can be people without any formal education who are wise, who have wisdom, right? So wisdom is something that goes beyond knowledge. Okay. Now again we have to understand, now in Buddhism, when we talk about Sila, Samadhi, Panya, this word Panya is very often translated into English as wisdom, but also it can be translated as understanding. So don't go by this Buddhist meaning here very much, because by Panya in Buddhism, which we translate as wisdom, we mean something different, not what ancient Greek people meant. But on the other hand, when we say wisdom as something that goes beyond knowledge, it's some kind of understanding, some kind of understanding you get from your experience about the world and the life. So, philosophy is something like that. So, in the ancient Greek tradition, they call philosophy love of wisdom. However, today, in addition to this basic meaning, when we talk about philosophy, we mean philosophy as, number two, the theoretical explanation of any subject we study, examination of meta issues. Now, philosophy as theoretical explanation of any subject we study. Now what it means is, in fact, when we study, say, mathematics, for example. Now, when we study mathematics in a school, what we do is we study how to do maths, right? Addition, multiplication, and so on. We learn how to do these things. However, in addition to doing maths, studying maths, we can talk about philosophy of mathematics. Now, if we say philosophy of mathematics, then we are not trying to do addition, division, and these things, but we are talking about the fundamentals, basis of mathematics. We ask questions like, what are numbers? Now, that is not a question when you ask when you study maths. There are numbers, you just do with them things. But in philosophy of mathematics, we will be asking, what are numbers? And then what are these principles? What kind of existence do they have? Things like that. Now, those are what I would like to call theoretical issues or meta issues. Meta issues means issues or things that go beyond that subject. For example, we can study law and become a lawyer. But however, there is also a philosophy of law. Now, when we say philosophy of law, usually lawyers don't study philosophy of law. But there is a branch of study called philosophy of law. Now, in philosophy of law, we are not learning legal systems, but we are going into more fundamental questions like, what are the laws? Why do we have to obey laws? Who is giving laws to us? What kind of authority do they have to give laws to us? So, things like that. Now, those things do not belong to legal studies proper, but of course they are meta issues about law. So we are discussing broader matters concerning law. Are there universal laws? Are there religious laws? Why do people have to obey them? What is the authority the law has? And these things. So like that, in many subjects we study. We can study in general science. But then at the same time, we can study the philosophy of science. Now, when we say philosophy of science, we don't mean chemistry, physics, or biology or anything. But we mean things beyond all these subjects, but things that will help us to understand the nature of science. We can ask questions like, what is science? What is the nature of science? Why scientific knowledge has to be believed in? How do we get scientific knowledge? What are the means of these things? Why these means are acceptable? And things like that. But if you go to study chemistry or physics, you don't raise these questions. You just study chemistry or you just study physics. But when we study philosophy of science, we are asking actually different questions. So in that sense, number 2, philosophy as theoretical explanation of any subject we study, an examination of meta issues. Like in our earlier discussion, I mentioned to you that we study natural sciences, we study social sciences, we study humanities. Now, behind all these subjects, we can ask questions about philosophical questions. Okay? And then behind natural sciences, behind social sciences. So there are a lot of issues like that. So when we say philosophical study, we can be studying these meta issues or theoretical issues. That is one important thing. And then the number 3, philosophy as conceptual clarification, analysis and investigation. Now this is something very, very important the aspect in our studies. Now philosophical study means it could mean conceptual clarification. We clarify the concept we are using. We define the concepts. And then analysis and also investigation. Now these things can be called a philosophical study. Now whenever we study a subject from this point of view, again, we are doing some kind of examination. Now that aspect belongs to philosophy. Now, in my previous discussion, I mentioned to you in Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamika Karika, we have all the chapters called Pariksha. Pariksha means examination. Now, in the Pariksha, you don't get all the information. You get minimum amount of information, but then Nagarjuna goes on examining, investigation. So, examine, investigation, analysis, clarification. I will come to that again after introducing the number 4. Philosophy has the worldview of any individual or a system of thought. Now also we use the word philosophy to refer to worldview of any individual or a system of thought. What is the worldview? Worldview means how a particular person understands his position and also the position of the universe. And it can be like we can have a philosophy on our own philosophy in this sense. And also we can talk about the Buddhist worldview. Okay, from religions we can talk about the Christian worldview, or we can talk about Eastern worldview, Western worldview. So like that, we can have larger categories where we talk about the general understanding and attitude about the world. Now, Buddhism has a certain worldview. In that worldview, Buddhism has a certain explanation about the nature of the world, nature of the human being. Yeah? So, that aspect can be called a worldview. Now, worldview is also considered to be philosophy. Okay? So, now here you have several meanings of the word philosophy. When we say we are doing a study or philosophical study of Buddhism, actually it can be any of these things. But not only this, there are also some more, there are some more aspects. But basically, to get an idea, when we call something is a philosophical study, I think this is something important. These basic things. Then we will move on to the 2 important aspects of philosophical study. Now, asking questions, examining, analyzing, and investigating, looking for consistency, coherence, and logicality. Now, this is one aspect. studying Buddhism from the perspective of different branches of philosophy such as ethics, epistemology, logic, ontology and metaphysics. Studying different philosophical aspects, areas of Buddhism such as Buddhist ethics, Buddhist theory of knowledge, Buddhist philosophy of mind, Buddhist philosophy of individual and society, Buddhist philosophy of economics, Buddhist philosophy of consumption, etc., etc. Now you can see, if you look at these two important aspects of philosophical study, in fact that is connected to, it's a kind of elaboration of number 3 here. Philosophy as a conceptual clarification, analysis and investigation. Now when we say we are doing philosophical study of Buddhism, one thing we will be doing is number 3, conceptual clarification and analysis or investigation. Yeah. So something related to that. Now that would be a philosophical study. Say for example, I will explain to you the difference between conceptual study and philosophical study, because conceptual study also we will be studying conceptual study. Now in any kind of study, if we look at the clarifications, analysis and investigation, then we are doing a philosophical study. Let me go into little bit detail of this aspect. Two important aspects of philosophical study. Now asking questions, examining, analyzing and investigating. Now that is part of what I referred to earlier under number 3. Now when you do a study, if you ask some important questions and also if you examine, analyze, investigate, then of course you are doing a philosophical study. So let us try to understand what this means is. Now asking questions, actually in the Buddhist tradition, this asking question has been a very important thing. Asking questions, allowing people to ask questions. Now this is basically a part of the Buddha's tradition. Now in a religion where the religious leader is considered to be divine, you have the statements made by the religious leader, but nobody can question these things, okay? But then in the Buddhist tradition, the situation is different. Now we know in the discourses we have many people coming and asking questions from the Buddha. Lot of discourses are actually dialogues. Now dialogue means dialogue. Dialogue means log means logos or word. Di means two. Dialogue means the conversation between two people or two groups. So now when we say something is a dialogue, conversation between two groups of people, of course you ask questions and you answer these questions. Now in my yesterday's discussion I referred to Achela Kassapa. Now Achela Kassapa comes and asks questions from the Buddha. So asking questions. Now there are so many discourses where either Buddhist monks or nuns ask questions from the Buddha or other people. Or in the Devata Sanyutta Nikaya we have divine beings coming and asking questions from the Buddha. So this very concept of dialogue is something very important. When the Digha Nikaya was translated into English long time ago, at the end of 19th century, Rhys Davids named it Dialogues of the Buddha. Now Digha Nikaya discourses as Dialogues of the Buddha. Now that is very interesting because of course Digha Nikaya doesn't mean dialogue, right? Digha Nikaya means long discourses of the Buddha. But if you read carefully you can see Digha Nikaya discourses are dialogues. So dialogues means two people are talking to each other. In a way, two people as partners of conversation, they are equal. It doesn't mean, the questioner is equal to the Buddha. not equal. But on the other hand, as a partner of a discussion, they are equal. So questions asked from the Buddha, Buddha answers question, and Buddha asks question, and they try to answer, that sort of thing. So questioning is something very important. Actually, in the subject of philosophy, we know that philosophers are not known in the world for solving questions really, but they are known in the world for asking questions. But if you ask an important question, that can lead to a good answer, but that doesn't mean that that philosopher has the answer. Now it is very, very interesting, particularly in the Western tradition. It is a very important aspect is, you ask questions. But then when you ask questions, if you ask right questions, then the right question can lead to very important discoveries. So philosophy, if you take philosophy and science, philosophers are known for asking questions. Scientists are known for giving solutions to questions actually. Science gives us always new knowledge. But of course, that does not mean that philosophy is not important. Philosophy is very important because philosophers have raised important questions. Okay, so philosophical study means really you asking some important questions. Now, when it comes to Buddhist studies, you know that in a traditional setting anyway, we are studying the discourses of the Buddha with lot of respect. Big sense of reverence, respect. So as a result, sometimes we never question anything. We don't raise questions. We just accept. Buddhist tradition has this, the mentality. Traditionally, we have such a great sense of respect. We don't ask questions. Now that has been the tradition. Sometime we in Sri Lankan tradition, when lay people come to monasteries on full moon days to observe precepts, in Pali we say, the monk would say, Yamahang vadami tang vadetha. You say what I say. Then the layman says, Ama bhante, yes. Now what is this? Okay, you say what I say. That is the kind of mentality. But in a question, it is not like that. It is not that you say what I say. Okay, you have also a right to ask questions, right? You have also a right to ask questions. So therefore this questioning attitude is very important in order to understand, okay? Questioning attitude. We all have questions. Now, speaking from the Dhamma, your Vichikichcha is terminated only at when you become Sotapanna, right? Up till you become a Sotapanna, you have questions. That is natural. And in the Dhamma, word is used Kathang Kathi. Kathang Kathi, what is the meaning of this? Arahant is called Akathang Kathi. Kathang, how, what is? Now that is Kathang Kathi. Akathang Kathi means an Arahant doesn't have questions. So Arahant is called Akathang Kathi. He doesn't have any doubts, any problems. But ordinary people are described by the word Kathang Kathi. Kathang Kathi means Kathang. How is it? So you ask questions. Now what I am trying to tell you is this. If you take any tradition, if that tradition has a good analysis of question, not only room for questioning, but also analysis of question, that is, that is a good mark of a good philosophical tradition. Now if you look at Buddhist tradition, in the commentarial literature we have, when Buddha meets people, Buddha asks questions. Now Buddha's questions are categorized. I think I don't need to go into detail. Katetu kamyata puchha. What is that? Buddha asks a question because Buddha intends to explain something. In order to explain something, Buddha would ask a question. So, like that, we have in the Buddhist tradition different types of questions. Buddha asks questions. In order to explain, Buddha asks Vimati Vinodana question, Pucha. Certain questions Buddha would ask in order to dispel the doubts of the people, right? So the different types of questions we have. Buddha asked different types of questions. And okay, those are the questions Buddha would ask in order to explain something. But apart from that, we have another philosophically more important analysis of questions. Namely, we have questions to be answered vibhajya vyakaraniya. Certain question patipuchha vyakaraniya, to be answered by counter questioning. And certain questions vibhajya vyakaraniya, patipuchha vyakaraniya, ekansa vyakaraniya. Certain questions can be answered directly. And then certain questions are tapaniya questions. You don't answer those questions and you keep those questions aside. Now you see something very important philosophically, because somebody can ask questions, but suppose a wrong question is asked, then you can't give a right answer, because a wrong question cannot have a right answer. So that means that even if somebody asks a question from the Buddha, there is no guarantee that Buddha is going to answer that question. In other words, there is no need to answer each and every question, okay? Now, you remember again, we were discussing yesterday when the Buddha said, no he, mahevan, don't say so. Sayang katan dukkhang, Buddha would say, don't say so. Because, there is no hetang and mahevan. No hetang means no, but mahevan means don't say so. Don't ask the question in that manner. Okay. Now in some other context, we have directly Buddha saying something like this Buddha saying, no kallo panho. What is this meaning? What is the meaning of this? No kallo panho. Not time. It is not the proper question. Kalla means proper. So no kallo panyo means it is not the proper question. It is not the right question. Now there is analysis of the question. It is not that somebody asks a question, you answer. Buddha says, no, the question is wrong. Question is not proper. So if the question is wrong, if the question is not proper, then Buddha will not answer that question. Okay? So Buddha will first formulate the question. Reformulate the question. You remember in one instance, the disciple of the Buddha asked, Ko viññāna āhārang āharati? Ko viññāna āhārang āharati? Who consumes the viññāna āhāra? Buddha says, no kallo panyo. The question is wrong. Because whenever you ask who consumes, the questioner assumes that there is a person, individual, who is consuming viññāna āhāra. Now when you say viññāna āhāra, viññāna is your own consciousness. Can you differentiate your consciousness from yourself? Your viññāna from yourself? No. But then when a person asks, ko viññāna āhārang āharati, who partakes the viññāna āhāra, that person obviously means that the one who has viññāna āhāra and viññāna āhāra are two different things. But viññāna āhāra cannot be separated from the person who takes viññāna. The question is wrong. Question is not proper. So then Buddha says, okay, you correct the question, on what conditions viññāna āhāra occurs. So not who takes viññāna āhāra, but there, Buddha reformulates the question, we say in Paticca Samuppada language. Now, when you ask ko vijnana harang harati, you are using the agent language. Again, in the Ranakardana discussion, we saw that yesterday. I mean, you assume an agent is there, doer is there, somebody to do that. So, particularly when you talk about vijnana ahara, vijnana means consciousness, chakku vijnana, sota vijnana, ghada vijnana, and so on. So, for you to assume that there is some person over and above vijnana, is, that is a mistake. So Buddha says question is not proper. Now what I am trying to tell you is this. Now in Buddhism, in the Buddha's discourses, there is a very, very rich analysis of questions. Okay. Now questioning is a very important philosophical way to do that. Right? And then Buddha has analyzed the questions. There is a very good study and analysis of questions. Very important for us to remember. So the questioning is an important thing. Now if we don't have questions, of course we can't do a research. Now when I will be talking to you in later one day on a research proposal. Now in a research proposal we have to have research questions, right? In a research proposal you have to have research questions. Now when you answer all your research questions, then your dissertation is there. So we have to raise right questions and then we have to answer those questions, then that's a part of it. So actually that we can say, so the asking question is a very important thing. And then we have examining, analyzing, investigating, right? All these things are philosophical aspects. Now what it means is, this is not a mere reporting. We can say so and so said this, so and so said this, so and so said this. Okay, that's useful, but what's the point? We are recording what other people said. But if you can ask some questions, make some observations, I think that is your contribution. You can always say, okay, this sutta says this sutta says this sutta says this. Right. But what is the point? What are you going to observe on that? That is the important part. Of course, it is important for us to understand what this particular sutta says and being able to correctly report it. Now, that is a good part of our, the important aspect of our research. To read some other author or other book or other article or sutta and to understand correctly and put it correctly into our own language is a very important thing. But of course, research is not ended at that. Research has to go on to asking questions, examining, analyzing and investigating. Now, this tradition I'm talking about is not something Western, okay? We have this in the Buddhist tradition. Now if you take Abhidhamma, Vibhanga. What is Vibhanga? What is the meaning of Vibhanga? Vibhanga means Vibhaga, Vibhanga, analysis, right? So we have this concept very much in the Buddhist tradition. So don't think that I'm bringing it from the Western tradition. There's nothing wrong in bringing it from the Western tradition, but we have Vibhanga in our own tradition. Now if you look at Abhidhamma, Yamaka, you can see that, that there are so many questions asked and then questions are answered, okay? So in other words, what we mean by a philosophical study is really this questioning aspect, asking questions, asking the right questions, and then examining, analyzing sentences, statements, and then investigating. So these are aspects of philosophical study. So in other words, any study we do, we just can't be reporting what other people say. Reporting what other people say is important, but that's not the totality of the research. Research has to be something more than that, okay? Now, if we are studying several people, several scholars, several views, of course we need to correctly report it. This is what so and so says. Now that's also is sometimes not very easy. You have to correctly represent the other person's view. That's very important. But Then having presented the other person's view, if you don't have any of your own views about it, then you are not a good scholar. Okay? We can keep on quoting other people. So and so says this, so and so says this. But you have to have some very important. If you can ask some good questions about what you read, maybe you don't have answer, but still you have asked some important questions. Maybe some other person will find the answer later, but you have paved the way for someone else to find the answer. So first aspect, asking questions, examining, analyzing and investigating is important. And associated with that, we can say looking for consistency, coherence and logicality. What is these things? Actually consistency, coherence and logicality, these are again very important aspect of anything we say or anything we write. Now whatever you write, if your statements are not consistent, then of course they are false. Coherence has again related meaning, but of course little different. And then we talk about the concept of logicality. What you say has to be logical. Now what are these things? Again, when you look at the Buddhist tradition, I will give you a couple of examples from the Buddhist tradition. Now in the Buddhist tradition we have very well-known statement about the Dhamma. Buddha says, Adi Kalyanam, Madhye Kalyanam, Pariyosana Kalyanam. Now what does it mean? Good at the beginning, good at the middle and good at the end. Adi Kalyana, Madhye Kalyana, Pariyosana Kalyana. Now what does it mean? When you say something, when you write something, beginning has to be good, middle has to be good, end has to be good. In the sense, they are consistent and coherent. Now if I start talking about research methodology, I end up in talking about Yangon or something, then there is no coherence, right? I mean, what we speak has to be coherent and consistent. Now when we say consistency, inconsistency means, opposite means, two things you say do not agree with each other. Now that is inconsistency. In one place, I think Buddha in his discussion with Satchak, I think it is, it comes in the Majjhima Nikaya discourse, Buddha, I think Abhay Rajakumar, I am not sure. Buddha says, Pure vachaniyang pachavacha, pacha vachaniyang pureyavacha. Nakote sandhiyati purimenama pachimang, pachimenama purimang. Nakote sandhiyati purimenama pachimang. What you said earlier doesn't fit with what you said later. Nakote sandhiyati pachimenama purimang. What you said later is not fitting with what you said earlier. Now what is this? What is this? Buddha is referring to consistency and coherence, right? When Buddha says what you said earlier is contradicted now what you say now. And what you say now doesn't go along with what you said earlier. In other words, what the Buddha is saying is your two statements are not consistent. If one is true, the other one must be false. Now, this also is what we can call logicality. Now, logical means when you have a consistent and coherent statement, that of course we can say that's a logical statement, okay? Now logicality means something consistent and coherent, also following the logical rules. So therefore these three things are connected with each other, okay? Now consistency, if there is no consistency between two statements, then one has to be false. Now what is the difference between consistency and coherence? Actually coherence means whatever you say have to be fit with everything else you say. Coherent. But that doesn't necessarily mean that coherence picture has to be true. Maybe if you are a good liar, you can tell a very good lie, very coherent. All the parts fitting into very well. Okay. So, but lie is a coherent lie. Coherent means all parts fit together. Okay. Now, consistency is different. Consistency is of course connected, but when you say consistency is your two statements don't contradict with each other. But the two concepts are connected. Coherence and consistency. I can give you example for coherence. You remember when the Buddha, the last moment of the Buddha, there was a question as to how one should know whether something is to be taught by the Buddha or not, whether it is Dhamma or not. Because when the Buddha was living, you can go to him and ask whether he said this. But when the Buddha has attained parinirvana, there is no way that you can do that. So somebody comes and say, this was said by the Buddha. This was said by the Buddha. And then I was the only person who listened to it. There was no anybody else. Now then, how are we going to decide whether it was really said by the Buddha or not? Then Buddha gave a criterion. That's called what is called Maha Apadesha. Criterion was Sutte Otare Tabbani, Vinaya Sandasya Tabbani. You put it into the sutta and see whether it fits. Vinaya Sandasya Tabbani, you compare it with Vinaya. Now actually the principle behind that statement is coherence. If the statement this person produces is coherent with other statements made by the Buddha, then Buddha says, you accept that. Do you get the point? Now, what the Buddha taught is coherent. Coherent means all statements fit together. As I said, Adi Kalyana, Majja Kalyana, Paryosana Kalyana. So, this new statement, somebody is coming and saying to you, this is what the Buddha said. So there is no way that Buddha is no more there to ask. How do you know whether it was said by the Buddha? Buddha says the criterion is when you say Sutte Otare Tabbani, you put that into the sutta. If it really fits very well, then you accept it. It's like, these jigsaw puzzles small children make. So you have a picture of a, say, dog or something, you have different parts. But when you put every part in the proper place, dog's picture appears, right? Now, because each part, when it is put into the correct position, then you can create a coherent picture. So the coherence is, in fact, internal consistency. Okay? So the consistency and coherence. Now, logicality means, I will explain this aspect further in my later discussion of research methodology, but things have to be logical. Logical can be described in two ways. One way is something can be logical if it follows the logical rules. Then we have to know the logical rules. I'm not going to teach you logical rules here, but there are accepted logical rules here. So if we follow the logical rules, then we can say logical. The second meaning is more non-technical. Non-technical meaning is we say something is logical in the sense something is rational, something is intelligent, something that makes sense. So for those things, we can also use the term logical, okay? So something has to be logical. Now, whatever we write, whatever we say has to be consistent, coherent, and also logical. So now you can see that in this sense, philosophical study is applicable to anything we study, okay? Whether you do textual study, whether you do conceptual study, whether you do any kind of study, these virtues, these qualities have to be there in your writing. I mean, even if it is the textual study, still your textual study has to be following these things. In a textual study, you can't say contradictory things, right? What you say has to be consistent. Okay, and also what you say has to be logical. So therefore, in the two important aspects of philosophical study. Now, this particular two aspects can be aspects of any kind of study you do. Not only Buddhist studies, any. But of course, here we are discussing Buddhist research methodology or research methodology for Buddhist studies. So therefore, it is very important for you to have an idea about how to preserve these things. So one is asking questions, investigation, analysis, things like that. And then looking for consistency, coherence, and logicality. Now these two are very important aspects in philosophical discussion. I remember, just as the final remark in this part, do you remember when Milinda and Nagasena discussion in the Milinda Panya? King Milinda wanted to ask questions from Venerable Nagasena. Then Venerable Nagasena says something very interesting. He says, okay, great king, I agree with you to discuss. If you agree to discuss as scholars, not as king and subject, then king asks, what is the difference? Then Nagasena says, okay, when the king and his subject has a discussion, king says something, and if the other person disagrees, finish. Okay. So that is the conversation between the king and ordinary person. If you go against what the king says, your life is over. But then he asks, okay, what is the difference? How do the scholars discuss? Scholars, of course, you give something, the other person gives opposite answer, criticize, critique, investigate, analysis. So if you are ready for that, I am ready to discuss with you. Now, this is a very, very interesting historical thing, right? So the philosophical or the academic discussion has to be not like a king and his subject, okay? King has the right answer and the other person has to accept it. No, nothing like that. When the academics discuss things, they disagree. They have arguments and they have counter arguments, arguments against. So they academically have arguments and counter arguments, means academical fighting, not really physical fighting, but you are academically arguing with somebody. So that aspect, the story in Milinda Panya gives this good example for this asking questions, analyzing, examination, investigation, and also looking for consistency, coherence. Now in the academic research, I think you might remember in my very first discussion, I was discussing with you what is the new knowledge in Buddhist studies. How can we produce a new knowledge? Now, if you can find something inconsistent, incoherent, or illogical, something in another writer, another scholar, I think that is a contribution academically. That's a new knowledge. Okay. Now there are so many great scholars in the world, great Buddhist scholars in the world. When you study them, if you can find out some inconsistency in their ideas, that's a good contribution. That's a new knowledge, really. Incoherence in the ideas. So, this is a very important aspect of when we say something we study by philosophical means. Now, this is common to any kind of study. Then we will move on, studying Buddhism from perspective of different branches of Western philosophy, such as ethics, epistemology, logic, ontology, metaphysics. Now, these are branches of Western philosophy. Now, today when we study philosophy, we study ethics, we study epistemology, logic, ontology, metaphysics. Metaphysics means things that go beyond our sensory perception. So many other things actually in religious studies, even Buddhist karma, nirvana, things like that can be metaphysics in a way. Not necessarily, but in a manner we can say they are metaphysics. And ontology means the existence. Now in the Western philosophy, they study the existence of God or existence of any other thing. So the ontology is that. And then we have logic, we have epistemology. Epistemology means the theory of knowledge, about knowledge, and then ethics, good and bad. Now we can talk about Buddhist ethics. We can investigate on Buddhist epistemology, Buddhist ontology, Buddhist metaphysics. So philosophical study can mean studying Buddhism from those points of view is one way to understand philosophical study, okay? So we say, we can talk about Buddhist ethics. Now there are so many authors who have written on Buddhist ethics. In English language we find Tachibana, one Japanese scholar a long time ago, and then Venerable Hammalava Saddhatissa, one Sri Lankan Buddhist monk who lived in London, and then Premasiri, another Sri Lankan scholar. I mean, if you take Buddhist ethics, there are so many people who have done research on Buddhist ethics. Right? Now, if you want to do Buddhist ethics, you have to look at those, the things who have already done it, and then you can see whether there is any room for you to do a new research. Okay. So now Buddhist ethics, Buddhist epistemology. I here refer to K.N. Jaitilaka's Early Buddhist Theory of Knowledge, 1963. Now almost 50 years, is a good example for this category of studies. Now he studies early Buddhist theory of knowledge, so Buddhist epistemology. So like that, we can take this concept from Western philosophy or philosophy and then do a Buddhist study on that. So Buddhist theory of knowledge, Buddhist ethics, Buddhist epistemology, both are same. So like that. Now this is one way of doing a philosophical study. And another way would be studying different philosophical aspects, areas of Buddhism, such as Buddhist ethics, Buddhist theory of knowledge, Buddhist philosophy of mind, Buddhist philosophy of individual, Buddhist philosophy of society, Buddhist philosophy of economics, Buddhist philosophy of consumption. Now you see, we can talk about in a somewhat general sense, we can talk about Buddhist philosophy of mind. When we say Buddhist philosophy of mind, of course Abhidharma studies can be a part of that. But apart from that, what the Buddha said about mind. Now philosophy of mind is again branch of Western philosophy. But we don't have to really, the thing that philosophy of mind is only in the Western philosophy. If you take Buddhist Abhidharma, Buddhist analysis of mind, there is so much about Buddhist philosophy of mind in Buddhism, okay? So studying Buddhism from Buddhist aspect. Now what is the difference between studying Buddhism from perspective of different branches of philosophy? And then the number two is studying different philosophical aspects. Now one is you take the Western philosophical concept and looking from that perspective, whether Buddhism has those things. The other is really what we can call in broadly philosophy. You can say Buddhist philosophy of consumption. That is something to do with economics. So there we use the word philosophy in a somewhat non-technical sense. Philosophy means what is the Buddhist ideas? What are the Buddhist assumptions? What are the Buddhist insights? So all these about consumption. Now Buddhist philosophy of economics, much broader way, we can talk about Buddhist. And then Buddhist philosophy of individual and society. So this is another way. So you can see a philosophical study can be several different things. And then I give you this example, Early Buddhist Theory of Knowledge. Now this is one of the early books, but considered to be a very, very good contribution. Now Early Buddhist Theory of Knowledge, K.N. Jaitilaka studies the theory of knowledge that was operative and accepted in the early Buddhist discourses. Up to K.N. Jaitilaka's research, the scholars believed that Buddhism is a form of rationalism. This explained to you what rationalism and empiricism means earlier. Now K.N. Jayatilaka proves that Buddhism is not really a rationalism, Buddhism is a type of empiricism. That was one of the main points. So up to that point, scholars believe that it is a rationalism. But K.N. Jayatilaka showed that no, in early Buddhism, the Buddha is an empiricist. Empiricism. Ultimately, knowledge derives from experience. So, now, interesting thing is, the K.N. Jayatilaka takes the idea from Western philosophy. He is a trained Western philosopher. So, he takes the idea, theory of knowledge, but then he tries to show how in the teaching of the Buddha, in the discourses, you can, based on those things, how you can build a Buddhist theory of knowledge. Okay. Now, the K.N. Jayatilaka wrote this actually it was published in 1963, but he wrote it even earlier. So, half a century later. Now, today, if we want to do Buddhist theory of knowledge, we need to really master this kind of books and then acquire the knowledge in the book, and then only we can go further. Okay. Now, in my own writings, in fact, I have commented on some aspects of K.N. Jayatilaka's theory of knowledge, but that doesn't mean that I am equal to K.N. Jayatilaka. It's not like that. But of course, when you study carefully, you must be able to see there are certain things you can comment. There are certain things you can disagree. There are certain things you can improve on. Now that is how the knowledge develops. Okay. Now that's a different aspect. So K.N. Jayatilaka's early Buddhist theory of knowledge is a good example for this kind of category. Okay. What I wanted to show to you is okay, we will move on to conceptual studies from this, but philosophical studies, let me summarize what I wanted to tell you. In a philosophical study, there is a certain aspect which is common to any study, like asking questions, conceptual clarification, things like that. That is common to any study, right? That's one aspect. The other aspect is you take a philosophical theme, Buddhist ethics, Buddhist epistemology, Buddhist logic, and like that, and then you make a study. So those are the two important ways that we can engage in Buddhist philosophical studies. Okay. Now some of you may be wanting to do in future that kind of study. Okay. So then you have to be prepared for that, and this should give you some idea what we can do. Okay. Okay. Before proceeding any further, do you have any questions or comments or anything you don't agree with me? We were talking about asking questions, so you can ask questions. Okay. So philosophical studies are really a very important aspect of Buddhist research. Oh, wonderful.
See, I have a problem that if we have some doubt regarding Buddhist teachings, if it is taught by the Buddha or not, we have to first Sukti Ottavita.
Right.
To go to the Sutta.
Yeah.
And then second one is really
Sandasya. Yeah.
Why the Buddha is Abhidhamma?
You are putting me into trouble because we don't need to go to the question whether Abhidhamma was existing by the time Buddha attained Parinirvana. But the now important thing is, I think, Venerable, my answer would be, when you say Sutta, in the early discourses, what we have is Sutta and Vinaya. Those are the two categories. Of course, Dhamma Vinaya comes along with that, But basically, sutta, I mean, the what is meant is really the sources. So sutta is the source, Vinaya is the source. Now if you look at Abhidhamma, Abhidhamma is also really coming from the suttas. Abhidhamma coming from the Dhamma. So when you compare with the Dhamma, of course it is also compared with Abhidhamma. So that would be my answer. But when we say Sutta and Vinaya, Sutta means basically the sources. Vinaya can be Vinaya rules and also the Vinaya Pitaka. But you remember in the first Sanghayana, Venerable Mahakassapa says, Dhammancha Vinayancha Sanghaya. Dhamma and the Vinaya. So Dhamma and the Vinaya were the two things that existed. But Abhidhamma should be included in the Dhamma. So when you Sutte Otare Tabbani, Sutta really referred to Dhamma, but why Sutta not Dhamma is basically Sutta refers to more to the sources, what is in the Sutta. So Dhamma and Sutta go together. Dhamma is the content, Sutta is the more to the source. Yeah. So Abhidhamma was not included simply because Abhidhamma was included in the Dhamma. Yeah. Yes, yes.
Maybe they are sort of
Okay, why don't you take a short break, 5 minutes, and then we will come back.